Emerson, Lake, and Palmer were never just a band. They were a lightning rod, loved, debated, and often misunderstood. ELP pushed rock to its limits with ambition and virtuosity. But this isn't their story as told by critics or the charts. This is the story of Emerson, Lake, and Palmer told by the fans who felt it.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich, and we have a first-time guest on the show. Bruce Pegg is the author of Welcome Back, My Friends, A People's History of Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. Bruce, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Eric. Appreciate it.
This book has a foreword by Carl Palmer, the surviving member of the band. Also contributions from Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, journalist, filmmaker Cameron Crowe, also. Amazing images from the archive of acclaimed rock photographer Neil Preston, and of course, the story of ELP. Now, this is told in the words of over 370 fans as they remember 240 different concerts across a 40-year career. What a tribute to a band that deserves the praise. Critics like Lester Bangs never gave them much respect, but this book proves the critics wrong. Clearly, the band has made an impact on fans, right?
Absolutely. It's, when you think, I think their last studio album was 1996 or something like that. And their last performance was 2010. So, their legacy still lives on. And several of the contributions later in the book are from people that never got to see them. I never got to actually see them in the flesh as a three-piece band. It's just amazing. It's quite a legacy. And they're one of those bands, I think, that just kind of at this point kind of go under the radar a little bit. I don't think they get as much appreciation as I think they really deserve.
But they do fall into that category of bands who never really received the praise that they should have gotten from critics, right? I mean, that's the
Absolutely.
thing with bands like Yes and King Crimson and those types of bands. Why do critics have a problem with bands like Emerson, Lake, and Palmer? Brilliant musicians. The songs are fantastic.
I think a lot of that, in my opinion, I'm a musician myself. I've played for 40 odd years and have been surrounded by music and for all my life. And I think a lot of it is critics aren't musicians. They don't understand when Keith Emerson plays a keyboard part, he's phenomenal. I mean, he's just right at the top of that game. Could quite easily have been playing, in fact did play in front of symphony orchestras, and I just don't think critics really understand what it is to be a musician. People like Chris Gowan and Lester Bangs, they really like the old rock and roll, the very basic stuff, which I love too. But these are the guys that stretch the envelope and really push the medium as far as it could possibly go, and I just don't think the critics got that.
And put on a fantastic show as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. And but the thing is, I'm not a musician, but I love music. I am a music fanatic. I love ELP. So that goes against what these critics are saying. I don't need to be a musician to appreciate. These are just good songs.
Yeah. Well, and there's that too. I mean, the material that they used, Greg Lake's ballads, I think, have stood the test of time. Lucky Man and C'est La Vie and songs like that. Just gorgeous, gorgeous songs that had that crossover appeal, that mass appeal. And but to me, Emerson and to a certain lesser extent Carl Palmer brought that classical influence into the band to make what I think is a really unique sound, even for the prog guys.
Before we get to some of the fan stories, take us back to when and how the band is formed. This was during the year of the supergroup.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And so it was, I think everybody had kind of gotten to that point musically, so 1969, where the boundaries of pop music have been really stretched, and I think a lot of these guys were looking for new ways to express themselves. I think in Greg Lake's case, I think he felt a little bit intimidated or stifled by the King Crimson setup, so I think he was looking to get out of that. Palmer had gotten his chops through playing for Atomic Rooster and The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, which is not a gig I would have gone for because it was definitely a crazy world.
There was a showman, right?
Yes,
Arthur
yes,
Brown.
he was. Yeah, absolutely. And then Keith, I think really just saw ELP as an extension of the Nice, his first band, but I think he had a lot more creative control over ELP and the direction they were taking. So I think that's what made it an inviting proposition for him. 70 is really the start of the band.
And as for stories from fans, they go way back to the pre ELP days, we should note. One from the Pier Pavilion in, I'm going to need some help here. It's in the UK, Felixstowe?
Felixstowe, very good.
Felixstowe, I was close.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
August 9th, 1969, Graham Day, the fan, a seaside resort. He saw the Nice, Keith Emerson's band, Nice, and Graham writes, quote, Keith Emerson had acquired a Hammond organ, and to produce new sounds on stage, we had heard that he experimented with rocking the instrument backward and forwards and memorably jamming knives into the keyboards and thrusting them into the back of the organ as well. The ceremonial daggers were provided by Rhodey Lemmy of Motorhead fame. That's so cool.
That's the story. Yeah, Lemmy worked with Hendrix as well before going off onto a band called Hawkwind, which is a band I remember from back in the early 70s in my days in England. And so yeah, quite a story.
Any favorite Keith Emerson stories for you that are in the book like this about his showmanship? Didn't he light the keys on fire, or what was this?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. He would, get on top of the keyboard. He would pull the keyboard over on top of himself and then play it backwards over the top of the keyboard as he was lying on the floor. And he would throw stuff around, and just a great showman. And if you think about, how static that band could have been. You got Cole Palmer really tucked away behind a massive drum kit, and Greg Lake really just pretty much strumming on the other side of the stage. That band really needed a visual component, and the book is full of stories of him, just literally bouncing off the furniture, and even in one case, I can't remember which story it is, but even falling off the stage and into an audience member's lap. So I mean, it's certainly the absolute showman.
The band made their formal debut at the Isle of Wight Festival, August 1970. And you write, quote, immediately appearing shoulder to shoulder on the Saturday, which such luminaries as The Doors, The Who, 10 Years After, Free, and Joni Mitchell performed. In September, they began a lengthy tour of Britain. By November, they were touring Europe and had released their first eponymous album. They were working really hard early on, right? I mean, you write about this throughout 71, 72, they produced at a breakneck pace in the studio, and then they're on the road.
Yeah, it's really amazing how hard that band worked in the early days to get to where they got to be. Just every single venue imaginable throughout Europe, and I think they got very lucky early on in America as well. A lot of English bands, as you know, struggle to break through in America for obvious reasons, with the size and the just trying to get a foothold in such a big country. And but they managed to do it very, very quickly. And it's, if you think about it, by the time you get to Brain Salad Surgery, which is 73, these guys are headlining not just the big halls, but they're headlining stadiums now. They've gone in 4 years from basically from hitting the clubs to arena rock. And one of the things I think, and I say it in the book, is that I really think that they pioneered that whole idea of arena rock. They were determined to put on as big a show as possible, and they were, of course, known throughout Europe and America for taking tons and tons of equipment and huge tractor trailers, a scale of which we kind of take for granted now, I think, with the big shows. But back in the day, they were pioneers for that.
Yeah, I made note of that in here about they had a separate truck for each band member, didn't they?
That was the whole thing. And I remember in the back of my mind somewhere seeing some video of these tractor trailers going down a highway and ELP on the top of the tractor trailer. So yeah, they made a splash even with that.
Great story from ELP fan turned professional musician in the book. He has a full circle moment with Carl Palmer many years later. This is Mark Prentice. He saw ELP in May of 71 at War Memorial in Rochester, New York. He drove 100 miles to see Poco with ELP opening. There's a interesting ticket. He was 17. ELP blew away Poco. Mark became a fan that day, and he says, quote, "I went on to have an incredible career. I've been a studio musician for almost 40 years. Played on 30,000 plus songs. I've had multiple Grammy nominations as a producer and produced a Grammy-winning record. I've had some success as a songwriter, but I owe so much of my drive and success to these acts that lit my fire. The primary one prior to ELP being the Rascals." Talk about ELP's influence on fellow musicians. How often did you hear stories like Mark's?
A lot. There's a lot of them. People like Frank Askew, who is in a band called Noddy's Puncture, which is an ELP tribute band in England, and my friend Rob Shepherd, who is in Manticore, which is a working ELP tribute band up here in the northeast of the US. These guys cut their teeth on Emerson, on Keith Emerson particularly, and just story after story of people either becoming serious musicians, as not just musicians that had mom and dad buy them a guitar for Christmas, and then the guitar goes in the closet. These guys worked at their craft. They got sought out formal educations. They were really became very, very serious musicians. And there's also many, many stories, particularly from European places. I can't remember the names now, but guys from places like Czechoslovakia and Eastern Europe that were classically educated, or classically they enjoyed classical music, and this just deepened that love for classical music for them too. So yeah, I just don't know of too many bands that were really capable of, like I say, not just getting people to pick up a guitar and strum a couple of chords, but these guys actually started to become very heavily influenced by classical music.
I'm sure people who are watching and listening are, like myself, wondering, how did you put all this together, right? I mean, how did all these compile all these stories? Through social media, through people you knew?
Yeah, it's various sources, mostly social media. I remember Emerson, Lake and Palmer's management putting a call out for stories. I think it was the beginning of July, the first week in July of last year, and my email just blew up on me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got probably about 150 stories just in one day, and so that was a lot of it. And we got some very good stories from particularly from people like Chris and Andrew Noto, who have amazing story that they started off just being fans of the band and saw them in Toronto and Buffalo and places like that, and now have gone on to work for Carl Palmer in his legacy show, doing the merchandise and also doing the drum tech work. And so these are people that are, every band has their passionate followers, right? But I mean, these guys are are really hardcore, and it was so good to hear from them and get their perspectives on things.
What about Cameron Crowe and Ian Anderson? How were you able to get them to be part of the book?
To be honest with you, I didn't.
Okay.
That came through Richard Houghton, who is the publisher of Spenwood Books, and Richard actually had those contacts. He did a book with Ian Anderson a while ago and asked Ian to contribute, and he also had the contact information for Cameron Crowe. So can't take any credit for that, I'm afraid.
All right. Well, we got Richard coming on soon. He's got his book on the Stones, the 69 tour.
He'll give you all the stories then. Absolutely.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the wild stage sets from ELP. On the tour to promote the Tarkus album, there was a full-size tank armed with cannons that fired polystyrene balls into the audience.
You've got it. Yeah, absolutely. It was a mock-up of that armored armadillo. I think that's the joke for it, up on the stage, and they it would just fire these little styrofoam balls at everybody. And I heard stories of people having to have to clean out Emerson's organ after one particular show where there was so many styrofoam balls it wouldn't work, and they had to spend a few minutes vacuuming out the organ. So yeah, I mean, and again, Eric, you've got to put this into perspective, I think. This is the early 1970s. We're not talking, Taylor Swift massive arena shows with the pyrotechnics and the
and Kiss isn't even around yet. We don't even have Kiss.
No, they're not even on the radar at this point. And so, and I think, this band was tailor-made for arena shows, because once you get into arenas, you've got to put on the bigger show. The other thing that came through in some of the stories was their sound too. The Emerson, Lake and Palmer, along with Pink Floyd, were pioneers of quadraphonic sound back in the day, and so you would have those last notes of Carnival 9 on the album, where it's kind of like this grinding, whirring sound, and they would put when they finished that particular song, it would go round the auditorium, around all the speakers. So, this is stuff that, again, we just take it for granted now, when we go to see shows. But back in those days, that stuff blew people's mind.
Emerson was like Jimi Hendrix on the keys, right? I mean, just phenomenal musician, but also a great performer. Yeah. Wasn't Emerson and Jimi Hendrix, didn't they have a possible band, right?
There was
Brian Jones too, wasn't it?
I don't. I'm not sure about Brian Jones, but I know that there was some talk about Hendrix, because that was the point when he was trying to search for new avenues, and the story goes that they did possibly jam together. But
Can
yeah,
you imagine that?
Oh Lord, that would have melted people's faces, no doubt about it.
Yeah, man. The music on fire, the guitars on fire, the keyboards are on fire. Yeah.
Nowhere to go.
Chapter 2, titled "The Greatest Show in Heaven, Hell, or Earth," November 1973 to August 1974. Now, this is when ELP reached the height of their fame, and you touched upon this. They released the album Brain Salad Surgery in 73, number 2 in the UK, 11 in the US. And here's what you write, quote, "After a 2-month tour of the US and Canada to finish the year, the band went on to play over 70 shows from mid-January to mid-August 1974, including 2 more tours of the US, with a headlining spot in front of 250,000 at the California Jam in April, and 4 nights at Wembley Arena in London that same month. To play the ever larger arenas and stadiums, the band scaled up their shows." So just when you thought that the shows couldn't get bigger and better, right? Talk about what the band did on stage for those shows, because this is where we get the levitating piano.
That's right, levitating piano, the massive artwork at the back as well, the Brain Salad Surgery cover.
Whose idea was all that? Is that Keith Emerson or the band as a whole?
I think the band as a whole probably did that, because they, like I said earlier, they were aware that they had to do everything had to get bigger. Everything had to get bigger at this point. I was a young kid. I couldn't make back in England in 74, and I couldn't make the Wembley show simply because I was 14 years old and I couldn't, talk my parents and let me go down to London to see it. From my little perspective in Leicester, where I was born and raised, playing Wembley was just like the pinnacle. I mean, nobody got to do that. And so yeah, these are just everything just scaled up. But everything gets to a point where it can't get any bigger, and they found that out later on.
By the way, you're coming to us from New York. So what led you to the East Coast from the UK?
Long story. I ended up studying at SUNY Brockport. Up near Rochester, New York, and just never really left, and had kids here, and so just forged a life here, I suppose.
All right, so you're freezing like I am here in Connecticut. It was below 10 this morning.
Freezing's not the word.
All right,
we're beyond freezing at this point.
Yeah, we're just above 0 this morning. Yeah. Mike Rusnak contributes a story. He saw the band December 2nd and 3rd, 1973 in Chicago at the International Amphitheater, and he talks about the sound being mind-blowing. And you mentioned the sound system that they had. So it's going around in circles around the venue. I mean, What type of team did they have to go out on the road with them? An impressive.
Oh gosh, a huge crew, huge crew. Again, these are I remember seeing Metallica not long ago and seeing probably what was equivalent of a small village put that show on for them. And so, to do what Emerson, Lake and Palmer did, they had to have a fairly sizable crew to do it. So
Were they making money on these tours with all the expenses put in?
well, that of course was not they were making money for that particular tour, but the next tour that they go on, the big Works tour, that's when they started to lose money because they had come up with the idea to bring a full 60, 70 piece orchestra on the road with them. And I just can't even imagine the logistics involved in bringing that musician. I mean, goodness me, I've played in bands where it's hard enough to get 4 people in the same room at the same time, let alone 70 classical musicians. They wanted to tour with the same musicians rather than, I think, what a lot of bands that do play with orchestras now do is they send the music on ahead, the orchestra practices it, and then on the day of the show you get together, run through it once, maybe twice, and then that's it. But they wanted to bring the entire orchestra with them, and that brought them apparently close to bankruptcy.
Hey guys, we'll get back to the show, but first I want to tell you about an exclusive deal for Booked on Rock listeners. Get 15% off any purchase at oldglory.com. Over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture. Merchandise featuring legendary music artists like Bob Marley, The Beatles, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and many, many more. Go to oldglory.com. Make sure to use the promo code BookedOnRock. Also find a link in this episode's show notes, or just go to bookedonrock.com and click on My Deals. Some great stories from fans who were at the California Jam in April of '74. One fan called it the holy grail of concerts as a teenager. Larry Berg talks about seeing a guy with no pants on trying to climb the fence, and his precious jewels got caught on the top of the fence. That's
you got a lot of stories like that.
Much safer to buy a ticket. Another fan, Brian Hart, said, quote, "There were rumors that there was an issue with the headliner, disagreements between Deep Purple and ELP. Apparently, Richie Blackmore was very upset because he wanted lights and pushed the show back, which made ELP go on very late. Was that true?"
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see the footage of Deep Purple set, they were not happy. This was the new, well, Mark III, I think it was Deep Purple with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. And so this was their first outing, and the album Burn had just come out, which is just a phenomenal album. And they were just not happy about having to play second fiddle to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And there's footage, you can see footage of Blackmore throwing a guitar through a television camera at one point. So yeah, there was a little bit of bad blood because of that. An amazing show. And once again, I keep coming back to this whole thing that this is, you got 250,000 people at a show that you can't replicate that anymore. No wonder people were getting in for free. It just shows of that kind of, big shows like that were in their infancy still, and you just couldn't control the crowds.
Bruce Pegg is the author of Welcome Back, My Friends, A People's History of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. What would you say are ELP's most important shows? Because I'm thinking California Jam is one, but there's the Isle of Wight show, but there's also Olympic Stadium in 77, Montreal. Right? Those were the huge attendance.
That's absolutely. Yeah. I don't know what the number is for Montreal, but that was a massive stadium back in the day. And for them to be able to fill that out, and they filled out all the great stadiums. I'm just trying to think, Chicago, Soldier Field, and places like that.
Was this okay when they played at Olympic Stadium? This is when they have the orchestra?
Yes, it's that time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where the video for Fanfare for the Common Man was done as well.
Yeah, because this marks the first or the end of the first chapter of ELP. Yeah. Chapter 3 is titled The Ledges of Extremes, May 1977 to March 1979. And they would not release another album or appear together on the same stage for another 14 years. What led to the end of that first chapter of the band?
I think they had just kind of run their course at that point. And I think the whole logistical issues of the orchestral shows and the money situation that they had found themselves in. I think they were just at that point there where they were ready to take a break from each other and go their separate ways.
And then we had Carl Palmer joining Asia
Yeah.
in the early 80s. Keith Emerson and Greg Lake did solo work after that, right?
They did solo work. They also put together another version of ELP, Emerson, Lake and Powell with the amazing drummer Cozy Powell.
Which you cover in your book, right? You have shows covered from that tour.
Yeah, I think we've got at least one story from every incarnation of ELP and the solo stuff as well. Yeah.
The band reformed in 96, you said? Is that what it was? In sometime in the 1990s.
94, I think it was. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's right around that time. They come up with what I think is a really good album that's very overlooked, Black Moon, and In the Hot Seat, which is the last of the albums that they did. It's all right. There's some good stuff on there. It's a great version of Dylan's Long Black Coat on there, Man in the Long Black Coat. So I mean, they're still a viable force, but you can tell at that point there's rather than trying to push uh, the music, they're more responsive to the sounds and the technology of the time. So, Emerson's not kind of wailing on the Hammond anymore. He's more subdued with the kind of sampling type keyboards and that were ubiquitous in that time.
Well, that was due to his physical ailment at that time, right?
That's a little bit later.
That was later.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Interesting.
So
All
yeah,
right.
yeah, and he had carpal tunnel, which was he had various surgeries on it, and it was a huge uh, source of depression for him because he just could not play. The sad thing about Keith Emerson is that he was a phenomenal writer. He could write. He could also, he could have also gone on to a wonderful career as a studio musician, session musician, those kinds of things. Um, but he loved to play, and he couldn't accept the fact that he just physically could no longer do what he was so great at earlier, and that is, perform on stage.
When they toured with Jethro Tull, they were on the opening slot, a shorter slot, so that would make it easier on him.
Yeah,
I just amazed. So he never recovered from that carpal tunnel.
not really. No,
Yeah, and it's just tragic because he took his life in 2016.
that's correct. Yeah, yeah. Somebody that I interviewed now, I can't really go into it because it was told off the record, but they said that he was just at the point, he was just so distraught at everything that was happening to him physically. And I think, he was a perfectionist. I think he was always, trying to be absolutely perfect on stage and off, and I just don't think he could accept that any longer.
Yeah. Well, that tour with Tull, Ian Anderson comments on that, and these comments are in the book. He says, as a fan, I was filled with excitement at having the ELP on tour with us, but with a little dread also, as we heard from promoters, that they were a difficult bunch to work with. What was it that Ian was hearing? And can you talk about how Ian was pleasantly surprised to find out?
I was going to say,
guys are great.
I was surprised. I was surprised when I read that because uh, everything else in the book points to them being really good people, and they certainly were very open and generous to their fans and had time for their fans. And I don't know if there was some professional tension there. Not being a fly on the wall for that stuff, I really couldn't say. But yeah, I was surprised to read that myself.
Ian, I guess, has been in the same shoes too, that maybe he's difficult to work with, but it's like all these stories get around there, and then you end up working with the guys and it's like, no, they're great, but
yeah,
Richie Blackmore is known to be a little prickly.
Yeah.
So, that one doesn't surprise you.
Prickly is a good word.
Yes. Putting it nicely.
Yeah.
The stories from fans are that the band sounded great on that 96 tour. One fan who saw them in, I believe, Brazil in 93 said the show was perfect. Bertrand Colexa, I think it's pronounced. And he said, tears of happiness flowed from my eyes at every song they played. So it feels like from reading these accounts that the 90s, that was a time when the band realized we've got some longtime fans here who really appreciate us. Like they were really taking that all in. What was your overall impression of the fan feedback from that decade?
We got a lot of stories from the book from places real far away. I mean, you mentioned South America. And again, South America has been a place that American and British rock bands haven't done a lot of work in. And for them to go down there, some of the stories, it was like the second coming, they would just, felt that these gods had come to earth to be there with them, and I love the fact that they throughout their career really were adventurous and they tried to push the boundaries both musically and as far as entertaining is concerned. So
Well, I think what sustained them is classic rock radio continually playing
sure,
to this
absolutely.
day. Carnival 9,
Yeah. Lucky Man in the
Lucky
beginning.
Man in the beginning. I mean, in regular rotation.
Yeah.
So they're reintroduced to
Yeah.
generations of fans to this day. I don't know who has the rights to their music now. I'm not sure how much we hear them in movies and things like that, but I feel like those songs are going to be around
I think so.
for a
I
very,
think so.
very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, at the end of the book, there's a number of stories, mine included, where we talk about Carl Palmer's legacy, ELP Legacy tour, which he's doing with two other phenomenal musicians. And that audience is predominantly our age, but you do see kids there. You do see kids, not just kids that are being dragged along by their parents. These are kids that are genuinely interested in that music, and it's really heartening to see that the music still has legs.
And Carl has the video of Keith Emerson and Greg Lake behind him while he's performing.
Yeah, it's chilling at times. It really is. This was footage that was used, that was taken in 1994 at the Royal Albert Hall, which was released commercially as a concert video. But they've taken other footage that was shot at that time, and Carl plays along with it at various points. Just a beautiful version of him and Greg doing In the Beginning in that show. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and it's a really, I think, appropriate way to honor that music.
That's what I was wondering, is it's done in a classy way, it's done in a respectful way.
It absolutely is. And then I can't remember the guy's name that he plays the Chapman stick, Fitzpatrick, I think his last name is, and Paul Bialatowicz, who is the guitar player. No keyboards. That's the interesting part about that whole show. Everything is done.
Wow.
Everything is done without keyboards. So they do things like pictures in exhibition. They do things like Tarkus, and it's and that's just the three musicians on stage on their own, and then they do various video segments throughout the show. It's a great show. It's very enjoyable.
You saw them in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
March 1st, 2025. Penn's Peak was the name of the venue. You had doubts going in.
Yeah, I absolutely did. I mean, I'm not a sentimental person. I love music. I listen to everything from Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley right through to Opeth and Steve Wilson and Porcupine Tree now. And I don't feel the need to revisit that old stuff. I've got my memories. I've got my I've got my CDs and my memorabilia, and so I was a little apprehensive. I didn't know quite what to expect, but I was absolutely blown away. It's a great show.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. The last show they ever played was July 25th, 2010. That was the original.
That's the high
three guys, yeah.
At the High Voltage Festival, yeah.
High Voltage Festival. You cover that in Chapter 6, titled "The Show That Never Ends, 1999 to 2025." High Voltage in London's Victoria Park, one-off celebration, band's 40th anniversary. What did those fans have to say about that show, especially knowing now that it ends up being their last?
I think consensus opinion was it was a bit of a ragged show. I guess from what I've heard, they had technical difficulties. Keith was still struggling at that time with his hands. And I think just a band playing, 40 years after they were first formed and not having played together for a while, all took its toll. But everybody that was there said it was memorable. They wouldn't have been anywhere else on that day except there to watch ELP, because they had made such a mark on the audience prior to that show that people just couldn't stay away.
It's a great ride through the band's history in this book, even like we said, going back before ELP formed and all of the incarnations of the band and solo projects throughout. It's all part of Welcome Back, My Friends, A People's History of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. The release date is January 27th.
Yep.
Okay. And you could find it wherever books are sold. It's
currently also available in a limited edition, numbered hardback edition, but that is available through Burning Shed in the UK. So if anybody in America wants to buy it, they're going to have to sadly pay a lot of money for shipping. But
for shipping, yeah.
But the paperback's available next week. And we've been getting some fantastic reviews. Not just saying that to pat myself on the back. It's there's not a lot written about Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There's only a couple of really good but hard to find books. So this fills a bit of a gap in that.
Yeah, there's a fantastic job in the photos. Plenty of photos in here.
Yeah,
great photos. So it's worth it for sure for ELP fans and fans of classic rock. This is just one of those bands that I've grown up on listening to classic rock radio. So really appreciate this, Bruce. Thank you so much, Bruce Pegg. Appreciate you coming on, and all the best with the book.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
That's it. It's in the books.